The dimly lit office crackled with tension. Jordan Carter, a hard-working and ambitious black employee, sat before his boss, Richard Langley, a man whose very presence exuded arrogance and entitlement. "I am sorry, but you are just not the right fit for this company," Richard said, a smirk playing on his lips. Jordan clenched his fists under the desk. "But I have exceeded all my targets. I brought in the highest sales last quarter. Why am I being let go?" Richard leaned back in his chair, feigning disappointment. "Some people just do not belong in certain places. It is nothing personal." Jordan felt the blood drain from his face. He knew exactly what Richard meant. And in that moment, he vowed that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. The scent of fresh coffee mixed with the sterile corporate air as Jordan walked into Langley Enterprises on his first day. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Work hard, and no one can take your success away from you." He had spent years building his expertise, working late nights, and sacrificing weekends. He was known as the man who could close deals no one else could. But in Richard's eyes, none of that mattered. As Jordan left the building, carrying the box of his belongings, whispers followed him. Some colleagues looked on with pity, while others, like Richard's right-hand man, Greg, smirked with satisfaction. Marcus, Jordan's best friend and co-worker, caught up with him outside. "They cannot do this to you, man. This is discrimination." Jordan exhaled, steadying his voice. "They can, and they did. But I am not done yet." Before walking away, Jordan glanced back at the towering Langley Enterprises sign. He did not know how, but one day, they would see him again, not as an employee, but as someone they could never ignore. In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers stretch toward the heavens and dreams are forged in the fire of ambition, two lives moved along vastly different paths. One belonged to Jordan Carter, a man of relentless drive and an unwavering belief in merit. Raised by a single mother who instilled in him the values of hard work and resilience, Jordan had fought for every inch of success he had achieved. He believed in the power of effort, the weight of determination, and the integrity of perseverance. On the other side was Richard Langley, a man born into privilege, who had never known struggle. To him, the world was a chessboard where only those of his choosing could play. Inherited wealth had shielded him from the weight of true competition, and he saw his company not as a beacon of innovation but as his personal empire. The corporate world where they both resided was a battlefield of numbers, negotiations, and silent politics. Every morning, thousands poured into the towering office buildings, their ambitions high, their expectations higher. Jordan was among them, one of the many who believed that skill and dedication could pave the way to success. Yet beneath the polished glass facades of the city's high-rises lay an unspoken truth, a system where power was not always earned but inherited, where invisible barriers separated the privileged from the determined. Jordan had spent years navigating this world, learning its unspoken rules. He had worked tirelessly at Langley Enterprises, believing his efforts would someday grant him a place among the decision-makers. But the reality was different. No matter how many late nights he endured, no matter how many deals he secured, the boardroom doors remained closed to him. There were unseen forces at play, forces that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with perception. To Richard Langley, Jordan was just another ambitious employee, one that could be discarded when his presence became inconvenient. It was a harsh lesson, but one Jordan would soon use to his advantage. For beneath his initial despair lay something far more powerful, a fire that would not be extinguished. As Jordan walked away from Langley Enterprises that fateful day, the city loomed around him, vast, indifferent, and filled with untapped potential. His future had just been rewritten, not by Richard's decision, but by his own resolve. In that moment, a silent promise was made. One day, he would return, not as a dismissed employee, but as something far greater. Jordan Carter had always believed that hard work and talent were the only tickets to success. He had spent years proving himself, surpassing expectations, and breaking every record set before him. But in a world where power resided in the hands of the privileged, his achievements were never enough. The morning after his firing, the weight of uncertainty settled heavily on his shoulders. Job applications filled his desk, rejection emails clogged his inbox, and the harsh reality of unemployment threatened to suffocate him. Every door he knocked on was shut before he could even step inside. Langley Enterprises continued as though nothing had happened. Inside those gleaming office walls, Richard Langley basked in his power, confident that the system he upheld would always keep him on top. He never doubted for a second that Jordan would fade into the background, another forgotten name in the corporate world. But fate had other plans. A single phone call changed everything. An unfamiliar voice, calm yet authoritative, echoed through Jordan's speaker. "I have been following your work, Mr. Carter. You have something that most businessmen lack: resilience." It was an investor, a man who had seen Jordan's potential long before he had been forced out of Langley Enterprises. "You have the skills, the knowledge, and most importantly, the drive. Let us build something greater." The offer was not just about business. It was about proving a point, about breaking the cycle that had kept men like Jordan in the shadows for far too long. Jordan accepted. Months of sleepless nights followed. Plans were drafted, strategies developed, risks taken. Carter Enterprises was born, not as a competitor, but as a disruptor, a company that valued innovation over nepotism, talent over connections, and integrity over politics. Meanwhile, trouble brewed within Langley Enterprises. Richard Langley's empire, once untouchable, began to show cracks. His arrogance blinded him to the shifting landscape of business, where adaptability was key and outdated models led to ruin. He dismissed warnings from his advisors, convinced that his company was too big to fail. Investors grew wary. Clients sought alternatives. And the name Carter Enterprises began to circulate in elite business circles. Jordan's company, built from nothing but ambition and sheer will, flourished. He secured major contracts, assembled a team of industry experts, and carved a reputation as a visionary. Richard, however, was still oblivious to the storm heading his way. The defining moment came at an exclusive industry gala, a night where the city's most influential figures gathered, where deals were made over champagne and whispered promises. Jordan stepped into the grand ballroom, his presence commanding attention. He no longer carried the weight of rejection. He was here as an equal, not an outsider. The moment Richard laid eyes on him, his expression twisted in disbelief. "You again? Still trying to find your way into the big leagues?" Jordan's response was calm, measured. "I am not trying, Richard. I am already here." The words lingered in the air, a stark reminder that the past could not define the future. By the end of the night, whispers filled the room. Whispers of Carter Enterprises overtaking Langley Enterprises, of investors shifting their allegiance, of a new player rising to power. For the first time, Richard Langley felt the grip of fate. This was no longer just business. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Success was never meant to be easy. It was built on sleepless nights, rejections, and the unwavering determination to keep moving forward when every sign told you to stop. Carter Enterprises had the vision, but vision alone was not enough. Investors hesitated. Partnerships faltered. Competitors dismissed them as a fleeting trend. Jordan faced setback after setback, each one testing his resolve. But resilience was his greatest asset. Every loss became a lesson. Every closed door led to another opportunity. Slowly, Carter Enterprises began to rise, gaining traction in an industry dominated by legacy corporations. Their innovative approach, combined with Jordan's refusal to bow to outdated traditions, set them apart. Meanwhile, Richard Langley's grip on his empire weakened. Profits dwindled. The boardroom grew restless. The very investors who once idolized him now questioned his leadership. The whispers of Carter Enterprises' success were no longer just whispers, they were headlines. Desperation made Richard reckless. He launched aggressive campaigns against Carter Enterprises, attempting to discredit them, spreading doubt about their ability to sustain growth. But Jordan had prepared for this. He countered with strategic moves, securing deals with clients who value progress over old money. Then came the final blow, a merger that no one saw coming. In a move that sent shockwaves through the industry, Carter Enterprises secured a partnership with a major conglomerate, one that had been the backbone of Langley Enterprises for years. It was the beginning of the end. For Jordan, this was more than business. It was proof that no amount of prejudice, power, or privilege could stop those who refused to be silenced. As he stood before his employees, addressing them as their leader, he knew that the real battle was not about taking down Langley Enterprises. It was about building something greater. The corporate world had been watching, waiting to see how the battle between Carter Enterprises and Langley Enterprises would unfold. Richard Langley, once untouchable, now stood on the edge of ruin. His investors had lost faith. His employees whispered of uncertainty, and his arrogance was now a weight dragging him down. Desperate to regain control, he devised one last strategy: a hostile takeover, an attempt to crush Jordan Carter's company before it could completely surpass his own. But Jordan had anticipated this move. In a closed-door meeting with his board, Jordan laid out the final steps of his plan. He had spent years studying Langley Enterprises from the inside, understanding its flaws, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. He knew the company better than Richard himself, and he was about to use that knowledge to deliver the finishing blow. Carter Enterprises had been making moves in silence. Jordan had been acquiring key partnerships, securing alliances with investors who had once backed Richard. Every piece of the puzzle had been placed with precision, and now the final play was about to unfold. The moment arrived in the form of a high-stakes shareholder meeting. The future of Langley Enterprises was on the table. Richard walked into that boardroom believing he still held power, still controlled the narrative. He was wrong. As the meeting commenced, the votes were cast. The numbers told a story Richard refused to believe. Carter Enterprises had acquired controlling interest in Langley Enterprises. Jordan Carter was now the majority shareholder. Richard's face drained of color. "This is impossible," he muttered, his hands gripping the table's edge. Jordan, seated at the head of the table now, met Richard's eyes with an unshaken gaze. "It is business, Richard, just like you taught me." The board members murmured amongst themselves, acknowledging the shift in power. For years, Richard had ruled with arrogance, dismissing those he deemed unworthy. Now, he was the one being dismissed. "You cannot do this," Richard sputtered. "I built this company." Jordan leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "No, Richard. You inherited it, and you ran it into the ground. Langley Enterprises needs leadership that understands the future. That future is not you." Silence filled the boardroom. The final vote was cast. Effective immediately, Richard Langley was removed as CEO. Security arrived to escort him out. He struggled, his pride refusing to accept the reality. But the truth was undeniable. He had been outplayed, outmaneuvered, and overthrown. As Richard walked out for the last time, he turned back to see Jordan standing where he once had, addressing the very people who had once been loyal to him. "We are not here to tear down," Jordan spoke, his voice steady, confident. "We are here to build, to create a company that values talent, vision, and innovation over privilege. This is only the beginning." Applause erupted. Outside the building, Richard looked up at the towering structure that had once been his kingdom. He had spent his life believing power was his birthright. Now, he had nothing. Jordan, watching from above, exhaled. The battle was won, but the real work was just beginning. He had not fought for revenge, he had fought for change. And now, standing at the top, he was ready to lead. Final line. As the city moved forward, so did Carter Enterprises, proving once and for all that resilience, vision, and integrity would always win. The war was over, but the journey had just begun. As the dust settled on one of the most shocking corporate takeovers in recent history, the business world was left in awe. Carter Enterprises had risen from the ashes of betrayal and discrimination to claim its rightful place among the industry's elite. But for Jordan Carter, the real victory was not in the boardroom. It was in the message he had sent to the world. His first day as CEO of Langley Enterprises was unlike anything the company had ever seen. Employees who had once worked under a regime of fear and favoritism now looked to him with cautious hope. Jordan knew that changing the company's culture would take time, but he was ready to lead by example. "We are here to innovate. We are here to create. And most importantly, we are here to build a company where talent is the only thing that matters." Jordan's voice echoed through the halls during his first address to the employees. Behind the scenes, Jordan implemented drastic changes. He removed toxic executives who had upheld Richard's discriminatory policies and promoted individuals based on merit rather than connections. Diversity and inclusion initiatives were introduced, ensuring that no one would ever face the same fate he once had. Richard Langley, stripped of his power and fortune, faded into obscurity. Once the face of corporate dominance, he was now a cautionary tale of greed and arrogance. He had underestimated the very people he had once dismissed, and in doing so, he had lost everything. Jordan, however, had no time to dwell on Richard's downfall. His focus was forward-looking. He forged new partnerships with companies that shared his vision, ensuring that Langley Enterprises thrived under his leadership. What had once been a corporate empire built on exclusion and nepotism was now a beacon of opportunity for those who had been overlooked. Months passed, and under Jordan's leadership, Langley Enterprises saw record-breaking profits, but more importantly, it gained respect as an ethical and innovative leader in the industry. Employees flourished in an environment that encouraged creativity and rewarded hard work, regardless of background. Beyond the boardroom, Jordan made it his mission to give back. He created a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, offering guidance and funding to those who, like him, had faced systemic barriers. Scholarships were established in his mother's name, ensuring that the next generation of dreamers had the opportunity to succeed. One evening, Jordan stood in his office, overlooking the skyline. The city that once felt like a battlefield now felt like home. Marcus entered, a grin on his face. "Never thought I would see you here, man. Running the very place that tried to bury you." Jordan chuckled. Neither did they. They both stood in silence, watching as the city lights flickered in the distance. Marcus finally spoke. "So what is next?" Jordan smiled. "We keep building. We keep proving that integrity wins. We show the world that no one can define your future but you." In the weeks that followed, Jordan's journey became the inspiration for thousands. His story was covered in major business publications, studied in universities as an example of resilience and justice in corporate America. One particular day, Jordan received an invitation to speak at a business leadership summit where the top executives of the world would be gathered. Among them would be the very people who had once dismissed him. As he stepped onto the stage, the audience fell silent. "I was once told that some people do not belong in certain places," he began, his voice steady and firm. "But I am here to tell you that success belongs to those who earn it. It is not about where you come from, but what you are willing to fight for." A thunderous applause erupted as Jordan Carter stood, not just as the CEO of a thriving empire, but as a symbol of perseverance, justice, and undeniable excellence. Jordan Carter had not just reclaimed his place in the corporate world, he had redefined it, proving once and for all that true power was not inherited. It was earned. But his journey to that moment had been anything but easy. 3 years ago, he had walked out of Carter Enterprises with nothing but a cardboard box filled with personal belongings and a reputation in shambles. The board had voted him out, deeming him reckless, unfit to lead, and blinded by ambition. They had thought him finished, another fallen executive doomed to be a cautionary tale for those who reached too high too soon. At first, he had been paralyzed by disbelief. Carter Enterprises was his birthright, the empire his grandfather had built from the ground up. His father had expanded it, and Jordan had always been the expected heir. Yet, when the time came, the board had sided with his father's oldest friend, Gregory Lancaster, a seasoned executive who played it safe and followed tradition rather than innovation. The betrayal had stung. It had burned deep into his core, but Jordan had not allowed it to consume him. He had vowed to return, but not as the man he had been. No, he had to become something greater, something undeniable. The world of business did not reward sentimentality. It rewarded those who fought their way back from the bottom with grit, determination, and an unshakable vision. He had spent months in silence, observing, learning, and recalibrating. With what little savings he had left, he made strategic investments, choosing industries others overlooked: renewable energy, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. Where others saw risks, Jordan saw potential. He surrounded himself with a new team, brilliant, hungry minds who believed in pushing limits, in breaking molds. Together, they built Carter Dynamics, a company that started in a cramped shared office space and soon became a force to be reckoned with. His competitors underestimated him. They saw a man disgraced, struggling to stay afloat. They were wrong. Jordan played the long game, securing partnerships, acquiring small but innovative firms, and steadily growing his influence. His name began to resurface in industry conversations, not as the fallen prince of Carter Enterprises, but as a visionary who was redefining the rules of the corporate battlefield. Then, the opportunity came. Carter Enterprises, once a juggernaut, had grown stagnant under Lancaster's leadership. The company clung to outdated models, resistant to change. Profits were declining, and investors were losing confidence. The same board members who had dismissed Jordan now found themselves facing a grim reality. Without innovation, Carter Enterprises was headed for ruin. Jordan struck at the perfect moment. He orchestrated a strategic acquisition, buying out key stakeholders and aligning himself with a faction of board members who recognized that survival required evolution. It was not just about reclaiming his position. It was about proving that he had surpassed every expectation they had once placed upon him. The final vote was decisive. Gregory Lancaster, the man who had orchestrated Jordan's fall, was forced to step down. The board had no choice but to acknowledge the undeniable truth. Jordan Carter was not the same man they had exiled. He had become something far more formidable. As he sat in the boardroom once more, this time at the head of the table, he looked at the faces of those who had doubted him. He did not need their apologies. Their regret was written in their eyes. They had thought power was something passed down, something that belonged to those who played by the old rules. They had been wrong. Jordan Carter had not just reclaimed his place in the corporate world, he had redefined it. He had proven, once and for all, that true power was not inherited. It was earned. And this time, he would make sure no one ever took it from him again. Final line. Jordan Carter had not just reclaimed his place in the corporate world, he had redefined it, proving once and for all that true power was not inherited. It was earned.